Hello, welcome to Miss Rose's Story Time. I have Angus with me today, and we are going to be in chapter 19 of Carry On Mr. Bowditch by Jean Lee Latham. So I hope everyone's doing well. We're doing all right. Let's see, chapter 19. We're praying about everything that's going on. However, we're putting our faith and trust in God and not being fearful, because that brings anxiety, which brings stress, which stress lowers your immune system, and we need to keep our immune system strong during this time. Alright, chapter 19 is on page 184, and Carry On Mr. Bowditch. Strange sailing orders. Nate thought he had learned to face his sorrow until they sighted Cape Ann, and he knew that in a few hours he would be home. His hands began to shake. Desperately, he tried to keep his mind on the rocks and skulls of the entrance to Salem Harbor. Gale's Ledge to starboard, Pilgrim Ledge. What could he say to Elizabeth's mother? Whale back to starboard now, and a good berth to the northwest point of Baker's Island. What was there to say that wouldn't sound hollow and empty? Mid-channel now between Baker's Island and Little Misery, Nate stared towards Nagas Head and Coney Island, but kept them in line. If only he could had a way with words he could give her some comfort. Hardy Rocks on the south, the Rising States Ledge, the Souls of Eagle Island on the north, Bowditch Ledge. Elizabeth's mother would probably hate the sight of him. He'd only remind her of the happy months last summer before he had sailed. I'll tell her I want to return Elizabeth's dowry, leave everything just as it is. I'll say I have to stay with the ship while we unload the cargo. I'll get out. That will make it easier for her. Captain Prince's voice said, "Southwest by south." They were almost there. Soon Abbott's Rock to starboard. Almost home. Nate drew a quivering breath. When they had anchored, Captain Price said, "Go along, Mr. Bowditch. You aren't needed here." "Aye, aye, sir." Nate left the ship. Polly was waiting on Derby Wharf. She stretched out both hands to him and kissed his cheek. "Dear Nate, Aunt Mary's so anxious to see you. I came to meet you. I thought if I told you about Elizabeth, it would be easier." "You're like what Liza used to say of her, Polly. You have eyes in the back of your heart." Polly shook her head quickly and winked back tears. "I'm not a bit like Elizabeth, but I loved her. And I'm like Aunt Mary. I love you, too, because you made Elizabeth so happy." They walked slowly home, and she told him of Elizabeth. It had been consumption. It was more people than the sea. It takes more people than the sea, doesn't it, Nate? I wonder if doctors will ever find a way to conquer it, the way they are conquering smallpox. Mrs. Boardman was waiting for him. "It's good to have you home, Nate. I missed you." The lump of dread in his heart went away. It was not until after supper, when he climbed the stairs, that the awful aloneness hit him. He turned towards the big corner room where he had said goodbye to Elizabeth. He stood by the closed door, unable to open it. Polly came up the stairs with a lighted lamp. "I fixed the east bedroom for you, Nate. Sort of like a study with a desk and all." Nate followed her to the room, saw the bookcases, the big desk, the armchair he had liked. He said again, "You do have eyes in the back of your heart." 3 men from the Astra tramped up the stairs, bringing his gear. Polly whispered, "I sent for your things," she called. In here, please." The men looked around the room and nodded. They declared it was a proper berth for Mr. Bowditch. him with his tables and of figures long as mane to bowline. They tramped down the stairs again. Polly said, I hope you have something to work on hard. Why are you both so good to me? Pure selfishness, Polly told him. We like to have you here. It was more than a week later before Nate got around to what he had wanted to tell Elizabeth's mother about returning the dowry. We had such a short time together. I don't deserve to keep anything. Mrs. Boardman said, You proud, foolish man. I never want to hear another word about it. She seemed to think she had settled that and went on talking about something else. Dr. Bentley brought Nate up to date on the news of Salem. Mr. Darby was broken in health, dying, but he had accomplished that last dream of his, to have Salem build a frigate for the United States Navy. He had advanced $10,000 of the $76,000 it needed. Dr. Bentley showed Nate a copy of the broadside that had been printed to announce the building of the ship. The Salem frigate, take notice. Ye sons of freedom, all true lovers of the liberty of your country, step forth and give your assistance in building that frigate to oppose French insolence and piracy. Let every man in possession of a white oak tree be ambitioned to be foremost in hurrying down the timber to Salem, and fill the complement wanting, where this noble structure is to be fabricated, to maintain your rights upon the seas, and make the name of American respected among the nations of the world. Your largest and longest trees are wanted, and the arms of them for knees and rising timber. 4 trees are wanted for the keel, which altogether will measure 146 feet in length and hew 16 inches square. Polly went with Nate, Dr. Bentley, and Captain Price to see the Salem frigate in the ways. Dr. Bentley stared at the hull that was taking shape. Eliza Haskett Derby's last dream, he said. Free men of Salem, building a ship to defend America. We're going to need it someday, Price said. Mr. Derby knew that men always could see around corners. They went to the Derby's wharf. A strange crew was aboard the Astra, making ready to sail. Some men in Boston had bought the ship. Captain Prince watched the crew. Lubbers, I wouldn't sail with that crew if they gave me the ship. Nate spoke before he thought. I would, right now. I'd sail on anything to anywhere. He stopped, embarrassed. Captain Prince and Dr. Bentley were embarrassed for him. They began to talk about something else. Polly looked squarely into his eyes. I know you would. I don't blame you. Bless Polly, she understand. She knew that friends and neighbors, even old friends and good neighbors, couldn't fill the emptiness in his heart. When he and Polly reached home, there was a letter waiting for Nate. It had been elected a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. It seemed to Nate his mind fumbled, trying to grasp the meaning as cold fingers fumble, trying to untie a knot. Nate, how wonderful, Mr. Bowman said. I must see Mary Crownshield. I must remember something. And she put on her bonnet and hurried out. Polly's eyes twinkled. Salem will know about this before dark, and Gallows Hill to the Beverly Landing. Then she was sobered. I wish it had come sooner, Nate. She did not say any more. She did not need to. In the days that followed, she had fun bringing Nate reports of Salem's reactions to the news. Not everyone knew what it was all about, but they were sure it was fine. Science? They knew Nate had worked out something about navigation. Was that science? Navigation was just navigation, wasn't it? Getting your ship there and back. It didn't take a scientist to do that, did it? Scientists were bearded men who read heavy books and talked big words, weren't they? Who ever heard of scientists going to sea? Captain Prince came around one evening. Did you mean what you said, Nate, that you'd sail anywhere on anything? Yes, I did. Then you'll get your wish. The new owners of the Astri want us to go to master and supercargo to Badavia for coffee. He smiled grimly. They assure me I can pick up a better crew in Boston than the one we saw handling the ship. Nate said, at least they'll be better when you get done with them. Most of our men are scattered, but I did see Charlie Waldo. Nate grinned. Fine. It's always a help to have a handy cabin boy. Prince stood. Then you'll go? I'll write to them tonight. We'd better drive to Boston when the time comes. The stage might not have room for all your gear. Hab and William both were in port before Nate left for Boston. Tanned, brawny fellows that they were. They teased Nate, asking him how he kept his feet in a squall, but their teasing was mixed with respect. They had been hearing tales from men who had sailed under him. The night before their ship sailed again, Hab and William came to supper in the Boardman home and filled the room with their laughter and tall tales. Did Nate ever tell you about the time he worked problems on the powder keg? Mrs. Boardman said, Dear me, I hope the keg was empty. Hab chuckled. Not much it wasn't. The little runt was sitting right in the middle of the powder room for 3 solid hours. Nathaniel, Mrs. Boardman gasped. I hope I never hear of your doing anything like that again. Polly's brown eyes danced. You won't, she said, unless someone tells of him on him. After supper, Mr. Blunt came to call. He was about to bring out another edition of Moore, he said. Would Nate go over the whole book if he had time, his next voyage, and check it for errors? Nate said he intended to do that very thing. Mr. Blunt beamed. Good. I'll consider it a personal favor. It's no personal favor to you or any publisher, Nate barked. I'm doing it for the men who depend on it when they sail. Mr. Blunt's famous temper started rising. His face swelled and turned red, but he swallowed hard. Quite so, Mr. Bowditch, quite so. When Mr. Blunt had gone, Hab grinned and shook his head. William, the little runt has a temper. William smiled at Nat. Only about things that matter. They took Nat with them to see Mary and Lois. Mary smiled at them lovingly. I'm so proud of you, all 3 of you. Sit down and let me just look at you. It's been so long since we were all together. They talked until the birds began a sleepy twitter. William looked out the door. Hab, it's almost daylight. Come on, Hab bellowed, or we'll be making a pierhead jump. So the goodbyes were brief. It was better that way, Nate thought. He wished his goodbye could be a short where he'd leave for Boston. They wouldn't be. He'd leave Salem with Captain Prince. The master of a vessel didn't have to make a pierhead jump. Everything waited for him. If only he didn't have to say goodbye to anyone, especially to Polly. Young girls were always the worst of it, he told himself. The night before he and Captain Prince were to leave, he spent the evening with Mary and Lois. He'd be in a hurry tomorrow, he told himself. That would cut short the goodbyes. Then he returned to the room late. There was a note on the desk from Polly. She had to go to Danvers, she said. I suppose I should say I'm sorry to miss telling you goodbye, but I'm not. I don't think much of goodbyes. Do you? Have a good journey. Blast that girl. Nate crushed the note, hurled it on the floor, then picked it up, smoothed it, and put it away in a book. He was still muttering to himself when he and Captain Prince started to drive to Boston. Captain Prince gave him a sidelong glance, a little shy of a blast. Aren't you, Mr. Bowditch? a crank little vessel this morning." Nate did not answer. At last they reached Boston and drove to the wharf. They went abroad to the Astra and found her deserted of all but a watchman. "Such a crew," he complained. "Not the first crew, the second one. The owners had advanced a month's wages to the men to clear their debts. They brought them on board and fed them well. Then the scoundrels had jumped ship." "Good riddance," Prince said. "Good riddance," Prince said. They went to see the owners and met the first and second mates. Mr. Cheevers, the first mate, slim, hard-bitten, looked capable enough, but had bad temper. Mr. Townsend, the second mate, had his berth at the request of one of the owners. "We are probably supposed to make a man of him," Nate thought. The owners, too, apologized about the crew. They had no idea the men would jump ship, or they'd have taken precautions. "Good riddance," Prince said again. "We'll find a better lot." But when they had scoured the waterfront boarding houses, Prince shook his head over their scourings. They picked the best of the lot, advanced a month's wages to settle their debts, and signed them on. The men came abroad, some walking, some being dragged. By evening the crew was aboard, and the Astra was cleared to sail. Nothing to do now but wait for the tide. Captain Prince said, "Mr. Cheevers, how soon can you get underway?" Mr. Cheevers was so astonished that he stuttered. You're the tide?" "Mr. Cheevers." "Aye, sir." Mr. Cheevers gave orders. A baffled, bewildered crew blundered on deck and walked round the capstan. "Haul short, sir," Mr. Cheevers reported. "Set jib and mainsail, Mr. Cheevers." "Aye, sir." Prince watched in grim silence while the men fumbled with the sails. Then he said, "Break her down, Mr. Cheevers," and the Astra was underway. Nate saw the sidelong glances Mr. Cheevers shot towards the captain. He could read Mr. Cheevers' thoughts. "Are we sailing with a madman?" Presently Captain Prince said, "So, Mr. Cheevers, ready with your anchors." More bewildered than ever, Mr. Cheevers shouted orders. The Astra came to again and anchored. Captain Prince cast a look over the long way back towards the shore. "Call your men aft, Mr. Cheevers." Nate had heard Prince talk to his crew 3 times, but he had never heard anything like this talk. Prince finished by advising them not to jump ship since they were hardly in condition to swim that far. With that, Prince turned on his heels and went below. Now the meaning of the strange sailing time dawned on the crew. Nate looked at Mr. Cheevers and saw anger, amusement, and respect in his eyes. But the faces of the men before the mast were frightening to watch. Not 2 of the lot, Nate figured, had a slightest intention of sailing on the Astra. They had doubtless heard of the clever discretion of the other crew. They planned the same stunt, signed on a square meal and a month's pay, but they faced months at sea, the terrors of the Cape, and the grueling passage through Sandra Strait, a layover in Batavia, where men died like flies. The baffled rage was naked on their faces. Charlie Waldo approached Nate. "The captain's compliments, Mr. Bowditch. He'll see you below." Captain Prince had nothing about the scene on deck. He was not even wearing his grim go-to-sea look. He spoke softly with a drawl. "We'll stand anchor watch tonight, Mr. Bowditch, along with our crew, so they don't get lonesome. If we get past tonight with a full crew, they won't have another chance to jump ship until the Cape. After tonight, we can rest easy." "We can rest easy? With a dozen men who probably hated the sight of their captain? With a dozen landlubbards whose only recommendation for the sea was that they had failed on land?" Nate wondered. Well, that was interesting. That's the end of chapter 19. I hope you have enjoyed it. Please like, share, and subscribe, and let people know that are quarantined or in nursing homes or things of that nature, so they can enjoy the story and take a few minutes off. And I hope everyone's doing well and looking on the bright side of things, taking advantage of this time to spend with family and be creative and inventive, and hopefully after all of this we'll have some new inventions and discoveries and things that we've all taken time to do during this time of social distancing. Alright, take care. Remember, read 30 minutes every day. God bless you. Thank you.